VHF nets or on an HF net. But the same principles for the nets apply to CW or digital or any kind of amateur radio net. I recommend that you go to arrl.org and download a copy of the National Traffic System Manual. You can just do a search for NTS Manual, and you can download that. There's a lot of information in there that I'm not going to have time to cover. Now, in order to conserve bandwidth, and because some people don't have as much bandwidth as others, and the program will hang up if we have too much data going out, I'd like you to turn off your video and leave your microphones muted as we go along. I'll take questions later, and you'll be able to unmute. All you have to do to unmute when we get to the question part is just press the space bar and go ahead and say whatever your question is, and then let go of the space bar to mute it back up. If we are all unmuted, there's so much noise going on, nobody's able to understand much of anything. Carl, K0CZH, is helping me out. He's the co-host, and he's going to be taking care of a lot of the duties for me to administratively. So, please leave your microphones muted, and we'll probably run about roughly an hour. We'll see how we do with that. Maybe longer when we get to the questions. There's some tools you can use for working with traffic. You might not think there's much, and you may want to write these down so you can remember them. You want to always have ARRL forms. You can download these forms from the American Radio Relay League website at http://www.arrl.org. I've also got a lot of the same tools on the EPA website, and I'll show you the link to get to that in just a little bit. One thing you want to have is the FSD 218, which is the amateur message form. Back in the old days, we called this the pink card. It had a ton of information on it for traffic handlers. And you can download this card and print it out. And I recommend that if you're going to be working with traffic, you keep this FSD 218 form available, because it has a breakdown on what the precedence of messages, handling instructions, cue signals, abbreviations, pro signs, and pro words, and things that you don't use every day, and when they come up, you need to be able to look them up quickly. Another form that you'll need is FSD3, which is ARRL numbered radiograms. We use radiogram numbers. It would be something like ARRL or ARL 67, and that corresponds to a number on these radiogram forms, and that it's a shortened way of putting text out. It might be greetings by amateur radio or something like that, but instead of having all those words, you just do it in a shortened ARL with some number behind it, and we spell the numbers out. We don't write the numbers for ARL numbered radiograms. Now, here's where you can download a lot of useful aids that I've gathered up for the traffic handlers. Just go to epa-arrl.org/training-resources. And you'll find a lot of things that I think are useful for traffic handlers, including the message form that you really need to have. We're going to go over that in detail later on the radiogram form. One of my pet peeves is phonetics. I want everybody to use standard phonetics on traffic nets and on actually any net. It slows things down if you make up your own phonetics as you go along. So learn the standard phonetics and use them. this is a pet peeve of mine, and if I hear you using wrong phonetics, your own version of phonetics on a net that I'm net control, I won't call you out on it, but I'll repeat back to you using proper phonetics. Here are the proper ITU phonetics. It's not Abel Baker and so forth, and sugar whiskey. It's Alpha Bravo Charlie. These are standard phonetics. They've been around for probably 50 years now that we've been using this particular set of phonetics. And it's standardized. We use it all over the world. And learn them and use them if you're not using them already, but avoid making up your own phonetics. The problem with making up your own is it makes the net control stop and think. And if you're passing traffic, making up your own phonetics for words that you have to spell, it makes it really difficult for the person that's trying to write down the message that you're sending. Now, a traffic net is an organized group of amateur radio operators gathered on a designated frequency for the purpose of exchanging formal written third-party messages in the United States, Canada, and abroad wherever third-party traffic is legal. We're going to be dealing strictly with traffic nets tonight. And why check into a traffic net? Well, the main reasons for checking in are to provide an outlet for message delivery in your area, to bring traffic into the net, so you're taking traffic out, putting traffic in, to perform as a liaison station between various nets, and to enjoy the camaraderie of the net members, all of whom are performing a public service. On the local nets, section nets, and the regional nets, we have time for comments, and it's a little bit more low key. When you get up to the area nets where they're quite busy, there are no comments, and it's pretty much all business on the area nets. And we'll talk more about the different nets in just a little bit. Also, the purpose of a traffic net is to keep trained for emergencies. If you don't practice passing messages when you need to do it, if you haven't practiced, you're going to be lost. Now, each net is composed of the following: the net control station. This is the station that's been assigned by the net manager to control or run the net on an assigned day. The net control is like the master of ceremonies. He's a traffic cop. And while the net is directed, his or her instructions must be carried out without question. The NCS is in charge. Never transmit on a net unless you are directed by the net control station. Liaison stations are assigned to the various nets. One or more station will be assigned to take messages for areas outside of the net's normal coverage area. And also, these stations will be bringing traffic in from other nets outside of the coverage area. For instance, from the East PA section net, we have liaison to the third region net, which is a wider coverage area net, and we have traffic going out to that region and coming in from there. Also, from the region net, we have liaisons that take traffic up to the area nets. The net manager appoints the liaisons for each net. You have net members. These are stations that check in at random, representing a city, town, village, or any other designated area within the net's coverage area. And it is okay to check into a traffic net if you're not in that particular section. For instance, when we have the EPA net, it's okay for people outside of East Pennsylvania to check into our net. There's no problem with that. If they have traffic, we'd be glad to take it. And we will not send them traffic because traffic needs to be routed through the national traffic system structure. The net manager keeps an account of the membership on a roster and tallies all the check-ins and all the liaison functions. Most nets meet at a fixed time. on a designated frequency, and they meet daily. Many nets meet more than once a day, conforming to the NTS structure. I'm not going to go into a lot about the NTS structure today. You can ask the net manager of your net or the section traffic manager for more details about the various net times if you don't know when your nets are. You can also look on the ARRL website, look up net directory, and you'll be able to find where your local nets are. Here in East PA, our HF traffic net is EPA EPTN 3917 kilohertz. We meet at 2200 Zulu daily, that's 6 p.m. local time, and it is a sideband net. We also have a CW net, meets on 3585 kilohertz at 1900 Eastern time, and they have another session at 2200 Eastern time. Now there's various types of nets. You have the local net, the section net, the region net area, and then you have a group of people called TCC, the Transcontinental Cores. Local nets generally cover a comparatively small area, like a city or a county or a designated zone within a section. This is the bottom rung of the national traffic system. It's not the least important. It's ones serving the local community. It might be on a repeater, or it could also be on an HF frequency or a simplex frequency. Section nets operate at the ARRL section level and may consist of more than one section within a state, depending on the availability of operators, the amount of traffic being handled, and the terrain that influences the propagation of the radio signals. Regional nets cover the basis. Usually it's a call sign area. In some areas it may be different because of time zone changes, but basically the first region, second region, third region, and eighth region observe call sign boundaries. Other call sign areas might be different because of time zones and sizes of the sections of the regions. Now, area nets are the highest level of nets that most people ever get involved with. We have the Eastern, Central, and Pacific area nets. Each one serves a specific geographical area. Now, between these nets, we have the Transcontinental Core, the TCC liaison stations that take traffic from one area to another on set schedules, and the schedules are set by the TCC director. All of the above nets are bound together by liaison stations at each level, and these stations are assigned by the net managers of the various nets. They'll either be taking traffic in or going out, up or down from wherever their particular net is located in the hierarchy. These nets may meet one or more times daily to conform to the ARRL NTS cycle structure on either CW or phone. Early in the morning is the one net. The 2 is late in the afternoon, 3 is early evening, and 4 is late in the evening. So we have various cycles, the first cycle, second cycle, third, and fourth cycle during the day, and the nets are timed to correspond with that. The area net is held early in the afternoon. And as soon as it's over, the people from the area nets go to the region nets to pass any traffic they've picked up back to the region net. When the region net closes shortly after the region net, the section net comes up, and then the traffic from the region is passed through the section by the liaison from the regional net. Now, local nets, we really don't have a real tight structure with, at least here in East Pennsylvania, because they're sporadic. They may only meet once a week, so we don't set up a schedule with the local nets. But the local net can take traffic and bring it up to the section net to be relayed further through the state, the area, or around the country and even around the world. Now, there's another group called independent nets. These are nets that are not sanctioned by the ARRL, but we do recognize them as valid nets. They may or may not have assigned liaison stations. They're kind of a free-form net. They do have a net manager. They do have net controls, but they're not really affiliated with the national traffic system, although people on the net may be members of the national traffic system. Now, here's a few net procedures to keep in mind. Do not transmit unless directed by the net control. Sometimes it's tempting. You'll hear a station that's calling, but the net control's not recognizing them, or the net control's doing something where you think you can help. Don't transmit. Just let the net control find his own way. If a net control, he or she needs help, they can ask you to help. Listen for instructions from the net control. The net control may send you off frequency to handle traffic. When checking in, give only your call sign using the standard phonetics again. Reason for that is that's what the net control was listening for, the ITU phonetics, not something that you're making up. If you have traffic, wait for the net control station to ask you to list your traffic. He'll say, your call sign, list your traffic, then go ahead and speak slowly and clearly and tell them what cities you have traffic for, or if you're at a region net or an area net, what sections or regions you have traffic for. It may be necessary to spell the names of the cities. That a lot of strange names pop up in Pennsylvania, and occasionally I have to ask people to spell the name of the city that the traffic is going to. If you need to relay a check-in to the net control station, the way to do that is give your call sign and say relay. For instance, if I was going to relay a station in, I would say W3GWM relay, and then wait for the net control to recognize you. He'll ask you, he or she will ask you to go ahead with your relay. When you're sending traffic, speak slowly and clearly. Now, one way that really helps is if you take a ballpoint pen and then close the tip so you're not writing with it, and use the pen to trace every word that you're sending. Send no faster than you can write, because the party at the other end is trying to write down what you're saying. They have to write down every word that you say, and it's very easy to fall behind. A lot of people, even experienced traffic handlers, have a bad habit of going too fast. I may end up a line behind them trying to catch up, and I've been handling traffic for 50 years. Do not leave the net without permission or until the net is closed. Some nets will excuse you. The Eastern Area Net has a procedure. They call each station individually and excuse you from the net. Don't leave until you're excused. At the 3rd Region Net and the Eastern Pennsylvania Net, we just closed the net. You don't have to have permission to close. When the net is closed, everybody's excused. Always use standard phonetics. As I keep saying, this is a real bug of mine, that things that I think are important or that really matter, I'll mention more than one time as we go through the lesson. But standard phonetics are extremely important. Now, you want to be accurate. To receive and send formal written traffic in any mode, we want absolute accuracy, letter for letter, word for word. Sending slow and deliberate is a lot better than sending fast and furious, especially in CW. There's some operators that can go along at 35 words per minute, but if you can only copy at 15, that's not doing anybody any good. In CW, 1 or 2 wrong letters can change the whole meaning of the message. On phone, use standard phonetics again to spell difficult words. If it's a word that might be misunderstood or that the person may not know how to spell, spell it using standard phonetics. There's a pro word that I'll tell you in a little bit that you use before you spell it out, though. Don't be ashamed to ask for fills. If you've missed something in the message, ask for a fill no matter how long it takes. Sometimes under bad band conditions, it takes a while to get a message through. Don't be afraid to ask for a fill. We all do it. And then use the correct pro words. I'm going to show you more about pro words and Q signals in just a little bit. If you're the sending station, remember to speak or send only as fast as the receiving station can write. Now, this includes operators who have been around for a long time. Just because it's an experienced operator doesn't mean they can write as fast as you can talk. He or she might be having a bad day. Conditions could be poor, and they might not be able to hear well at their end. There might be QRM or QRN at their end of the frequency, and you got to go slow so that they can catch what you're saying. This saves net time. Sending too fast leads to mistakes, and that means you're going to have to ask for fills and corrections, and that wastes net time. So you're much better to go slow. Never Roger or QSL for a message until you are 100% sure you have it all correctly. Ask the sending station to wait while you check the count and make sure that your count matches the count on the message. And we'll get into that more later, but make sure that what you have is 100% correct before you say Roger or QSL. The way to say Roger is you Roger for the message number. You Roger message number 101. If you're on CW, adjust your key speed to that of the receiving station. Use good spacing. This saves time in the long run. And on phone, use the best possible diction, sending in phrases that are meaningful. Be on time for the net. This is for net controls or for all the stations on the net. When checking into the net, especially if you have traffic, be there on time. The same goes if you're the NCS or a liaison station. Try to be there early, be on frequency and ready to go. That's your responsibility. Stations with traffic should check in first. The net control will ask for any stations with traffic. If you have traffic, that's when you check in and he'll ask you to list your traffic. This allows the NCS to set up pairings with stations to move the traffic that regulars, we know pretty much where you are. And if we have message traffic going to your area, we know to get you with the station that's holding the traffic to get that traffic moving. We might send you off frequency, or we might send the traffic on the net frequency. Stations with no traffic should hold back from checking in until after the traffic stations are all checked in and traffic is listed. Follow the instructions given by the NCS at the opening of the net. Stay alert during the net. Try to follow what's going on. Sometimes it's hard when stations are fading in and fading out, and the aerial nets, you may not be able to hear the net control station. So it's really hard to keep track of what's going on. Be prepared to go to work if you're asked. If they need you to relay, they might ask you to copy a message and then relay that message to somebody else, because propagation doesn't work between the station that has the traffic and the station where the traffic needs to go to. This is especially true on HF phone or CW, where band conditions may be a lot less than ideal. Never leave the net without permission unless it's an emergency. This can be frustrating and embarrassing for the NCS if they're calling you and trying to figure out where you got to, and you've turned your radio off and gone on to do something else. If you need to leave the net, notify the NCS before you leave. Wait for him to ask for additional stations or for a break in the pace of the net, and then give your call sign and say that you have to close. Don't be afraid to check in late. It's better to be late for a net than to not check in at all. Just wait for the net control station to ask for additional stations. Every one of us will somewhere along the way, usually several times during the net, ask for any additional stations to check in. Now, record keeping is important. It's been a long time since amateurs have been required to keep a log of all their station activities, but it's a good idea to keep a log. That I've always kept a log. I'm gone from a paper log to where now I use a computer log, but I log what I'm doing and keep track of who I'm talking to and what I'm doing. It's a good practice for traffic handlers because you can keep track of what net you're on, the frequency of the net, the time and the stations you sent or received traffic from, and the number of pieces of traffic handled in that session. Just gives you a place to use as a reference. Keep a strict account of your traffic. It's one of the most responsible jobs you can have. Develop a system that works for you. I mean, just because I do it one way doesn't mean that's what you should do, but find a way that works for you to keep track of the traffic that you're handling. Now, you should file your traffic for at least 6 months before disposing of it. Well, I'll tell you what, in 6 months, I've got a big pile of paper because I handle an awful lot of traffic each month. So I really don't hold my traffic for 6 months, but hold it for a reasonable amount of time before you get rid of it. Traffic handlers who originate or receive messages for relay or delivery must accept the responsibility to deliver or relay and to clear that message from their station in the shortest time possible. You must relay or deliver the message. If you take it, you've got to move it. There's no tolerance for dead-ended traffic. Anyone who does that is tearing the system apart. We have a high standard for traffic handlers, and we've worked hard to get this standard and to get the reputation. It's been decades of passing traffic to establish these standards. This is strong language, I know, but traffic handlers take pride in the way they handle the traffic. It's the highest regulations and the highest standards in amateur radio. The usual procedure is to relay or to deliver a message in 48 to 72 hours or to send a service message back. And we'll talk more about service messages in just a little bit. Now, FCC regulations, all amateurs, especially traffic handlers, should read Part 97.111 through Part 97.119 of the FCC rules and regulations. This covers the information about third-party traffic and authorized transmissions. You can't take money to pass a message, and there are some countries that you can't pass traffic to. You need to be familiar with that as a traffic handler, or at least know where to go to look. A list of U.S. third-party traffic agreements can be found in the ARRL Operating Manual and other publications. Know these agreements because these are the countries that we can legally send traffic to. Now, pro words are words we use that have a special meaning. In the text of a message, there might be an amateur call sign. Before we read off the call sign, we'll use the pro word amateur call, and then we'll give the call sign phonetically, like my call sign. If I was going to give my call sign in a message, I would precede it by saying amateur call, Whiskey 3, Golf Whiskey Mike. Other pro words have specific meanings. All before means that you've missed some text and you want the sending station to repeat every word before the word that you say. All before and. You can look at these words. I won't go into whatever each one of them means. It takes too long. But these are the pro words that are common. If you're going to spell a word, you precede it by saying, I spell, and then spell the word phonetically, not A, B, C, D, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. If you have a group that's a part letters and part numbers, before you read that group off to the receiving station, use the pro word mixed groups. That tells them that there's going to be letters and numbers coming to them. If it's all numbers, use the pro word figures. That tells them you've got a group of numbers coming. If you're sending the time, you're going to send a mixed group. Like right now, it's 0002 Zulu. That's a mixed group. Roger, that's kind of self-explanatory. All afters, when you give a word and want every word that follows that word. And say again means to repeat what you just said. And then before you repeat it, you say, I say again. Don't repeat yourself during a message. It just causes confusion for the receiving station. Just keep going on at a slow pace. Pause occasionally, on key your mic, and listen to see if he's going to tell you that he needs a fill or something's going wrong. There's more pro words than that, but you'll learn them as you need them. Now, here's the hardest part in handling traffic is the radiograms, and it's really not hard. It's confusing and it looks like it's kind of threatening, but it's really easy to do. And by the time we finish this section, you'll have a thorough understanding of what you need to do to fill out the radio form. When you're on a traffic net, it's a good idea to have a supply of the radiogram forms, which are FSD 218 available. You might be called to take a message even if you're not expecting to, and having these forms makes everything a whole lot easier. This is the radiogram form. You can see it's a lot of blocks on there to fill out, a lot of things that you have to worry about, but once you do it a few times, it's not hard. The biggest thing on this that helps you out is when you're receiving a message, notice the big block in the middle, which just has a group of lines, 5 columns of lines. You put one word on each of those lines, and then you can count up the number of words very easily because your checksum, the check that's in the header of the message, is a number which corresponds to the number of words that are in that message. By putting one word on each one of those blanks, you know there's 5 words in a line, and however many lines there are, you just multiply that times 5, and it tells you what your check is, and you can tell whether or not you received the message correctly. Whatever you come up with on counting the words in the message should match the check that the sending station sent to you. Now, this form can be found on the ARRL website. I also have it on epa-arrl.org. Download it and print a bunch of them off. Now, here's an example message for you. I'm not going to have it on a message form, but it corresponds to the message form. That looks kind of confusing, but we're going to break it down one part at a time. And by the time we finish this, you'll understand what each of those lines means and what goes into a sample message. Well, not just a sample message, every message. Now let's look at the parts of the radiogram. The first thing in the radiogram is the message number. In this case, in our sample, the message number is 101. Don't say 101. Always say 101. That's numbers, not 101, not 101, 101. That's the first block in the preamble, and it's always the message number. The station who originates the message assigns the message number. Now, you can start over your message numbers at the start of each year, or you can continue them forever if you like. I start mine over at the start of each year. Your messages should be numbered sequentially. That way, if somebody has a question about a message that you sent, they can tell you message number whatever, and you can look it up and see what that message number was. The next is the precedence of the message. In this case, it's routine, or R. This indicates the urgency of the message and the urgency for moving the traffic and how to handle it. It's designated by the originating station, not necessarily by the person who signs the message. There are 4 precedents used for messages. The precedences are routine messages. These are the most common. They have no urgency and are mainly used for birthday greetings, any kind of a greeting you want to send out, season's greetings for a holiday, for traffic net reports when you're sending it to the net manager. Any kind of common message is routine. Welfare messages, you only encounter these coming out of a disaster area. If people have not been able to communicate out of the disaster area, they may want to send a message to their family somewhere else in the country. Now, these are welfare messages, and they're marked with a W. They are only handled after an emergency and priority messages have been cleared. Priority messages are messages that have a specific time limit. They're official messages that are not covered by the emergency category. This could be press dispatches, emergency-related traffic, not of the highest urgency. Priority means that if the call is not answered quickly, a possible or probable hazard or condition exists or is developing that could result in the loss of life, injury to people, or severe damage to property. Easiest way to remember it is if it's going to be damage to property, it's a priority message. An emergency message is always spelled out. Everything else, you can use the first letter of the word in the priority blocks, but emergency is spelled out, so there's no misunderstanding. These messages pertain to life and death urgency. They're very rare and are sent by amateurs only when commercial sources are absent. If telephones are available, if cell phones are working, if there's a commercial source for the message, we don't send it as amateurs. Very rarely will you come across emergency messages. You might come across them if you're working as a net control or handling traffic during a hurricane or a tornado disaster, but they are very rare. I've only handled a handful in all the years that I've been doing traffic. An emergency means that if the call is not answered immediately, there is a condition or hazard that could result in death or serious injury to a person or people. If somebody could die, it's an emergency. Now, handling instructions, a little confusing, but if you get that pink card that I was talking about earlier and download it off of our website, it explains all the handling instructions because some people use uncommon ones that you don't know about. In this case, our handling instruction is HXE. And if you're sending that message, you pronounce it as Hotel X-Ray Echo. Now, I've handled these a lot of times, and I know echo just means to get a response from the station that you're delivering the message to. But you can look that up on the handling instruction form and know what it is. This is an optional part of the preamble. Not every message is going to have a handling instruction. In fact, most messages don't. There are 7 handling instructions that are followed by a letter A through G. The originating station simply adds one or more letter to the prefix HX, Hotel X-Ray, to inform the receiving station what he or she wants done with the message. Just look up FSD3, and this has all the meanings on them. Handling instructions quickly, HXA followed by a number is collect landline deliveries authorized by the addressee within X number of miles. If there's no number, then an authorization is unlimited. HXB is to cancel the message if it's not delivered within a specific amount of time. HXB is followed by a number. It's the number of hours. You want to send a service message back to the originating station. HXC, Hotel X-Ray Charlie, means to report the date and time of delivery back to the originating station. That's through a service message. HXD, report to the originating station the identity of the station from which the message was received, plus the date and time. Report the identity of the station to which you relayed it to, plus the date and time. Or if it's delivered, to report the date and time and method of delivery. This is very rarely used, and it's discouraged. That this is just not necessary to track a message with that detail. If you have a message from the Emergency Communications Center, and it's being sent to FEMA, you might want to track it by knowing each station that handled it along the way. That's about the only time you would use Hotel X-Ray Delta. Hotel X-Ray Echo is to get a station from the addressee and send a message back to the originating station. HXF, F followed by a number, is you hold that message until a specific date. Right now, there's only one station in the United States that sends messages out that have the instruction Hotel X-Ray Foxtrot. And I don't know why he insists on doing it, but he's the only one in the whole country that does. HXG is delivery by mail or landline toll call is not required. If toll or other expense is involved, cancel the message and service it back to the originating station. You will see this one used. Don't try to remember them. Just have the card available and look them up. But I can't remember them all, and I have to look them up when somebody uses one that's not common. The station of origin is the call sign of the station that originates the message. In this case, it's Kilo 6 Hotel Tango November. This is the call sign of the first station to send the message, the originating station. This is important because it can be referred back to this station if any question about the message arises. Here's the checksum. This is the one that gets people confused, and most people, until they get used to it, make mistakes with the checksums. It's probably the most difficult part of doing the entire message. It's the number of words between the two breaks in a message. Now here you see right after the header, underneath the 101, there's BT. That means break. And right before the signature where it says Kate Hutton, there's another break. Those are the only two breaks that appear in a message. If somebody puts one in somewhere else, it's a mistake and it doesn't belong there. Break only appears in two places. Immediately after the header and under the addressee, there'll be an address in there underneath the 101. And then underneath following that is the break, the BT, and at the end is a BT. And to get your traffic counts, you count every one of those words between the two breaks. Now, these are grouped in groups of 5. I always group my messages in groups of 5, even when I have to write them out or when I'm sending them digital through the digital traffic network, or I'm sending a WinLink message. I always group them in groups of 5. To get my count, all I have to do is count the lines. I've got 4 complete lines of 5 words per line, so that's 20. And underneath that, I've got 3 words, so my check for this message is 23. That I can do it real quick. You're going to hear stations that they'll take a message, and then when they got to say stand by, and you got to wait while they count up all the words because they're not grouping them in groups of 5. And that just causes, well, a little bit of a problem. You can do it any way you like, but I recommend you do it in groups of 5. The place of origin is the town or city plus the state where the message was originated. This may not be your hometown. This may not be your QTH. The origination for the message might be the place of a person that you're relaying the message for, that you're drafting the message and sending it, so your call sign goes in the call sign field. But the origin might be different than your home QTH. You can abbreviate the name of the state. You always put the name of the state in there. In this case, she's from Pasadena, California, so she can abbreviate it Charlie Alpha. Now, filing time, that's a block on the message that is very rarely used. You might see this in during an emergency traffic when you're working a local disaster. The EOC is sending messages out and they want to keep track of what time they're sending it out. This would be a time-valued message, and the time will be included for the filing time, and it must be included all the way through the message to the destination. You never drop it out. You don't see this very often. It's not necessary unless the message is time critical. The use of the initial Zulu needs to be put in if you're using Universal Time or GMT time, and it must be used on CW. You can also use the initial Zulu on phone. The time is on a 24-hour clock, like military time. For instance, you might say figures 2130 Zulu. The pro word is figures before you give out that, and that was really wrong. That should have been mixed group. Now, the date is the date that the message is filed, not necessarily today's date. This is the date that you wrote down the message. Only use the month and the day. The year's not used and should not be included. Months are abbreviated: January, July, November, JAN, JUL, NOV, whatever the month is. And there are double figures for the day of the month. It should be 01, 10, 29, whatever, but it's 2 digits, even if the leading digit is a 0. Now, the proper way to send the preamble, like everything else, there's a certain way to do it. You want to start out by giving your call sign. This is Whiskey 3 Golf Whiskey Mike. Message number 101. Routine. Hotel. X-ray. Echo. Kilo 6. Hotel. Tango. Golf. Figures 2, 3. Pasadena. I spell Papa, Alpha, Sierra, Alpha, Delta, Echo, November, Alpha. Initials, Charlie Alpha. March. Figures 10. That's the way you want to send the preamble. Do it slow. Remember, the receiving station has to write down everything that you say. So you don't want to put anything extra in there, just exactly what's on the form. The sending station should always send their call sign before the preamble. This is because it allows the receiving station to write down who it is that's sending them the message. They may have missed the call to see who is sending it, but if you say your call sign, they're going to write it down and they're going to know who it is and have a record of who they got it from for their log keeping. Notice that the words message number are used before the number of the message. Don't just start off with number, say message number, and then the number of the message. Also, the handling instructions are spelled out phonetically, as is the station of origin, ITU phonetics. When the sending station sends the preamble as above, it's allowable for the receiving station to abbreviate the precedence. You're going to say routine, but it's okay to write down R. The name of the state, if I say Pennsylvania, it's okay to write Papa Alpha, and the name of the month can be abbreviated also as you write it down. Now, the address is simple. To fill in the address block, this is the same as you would if you were addressing an envelope for a letter. The first line is the addressee's name, and it may also include a call sign if they're an amateur. The second line is their street address. The third line could be an additional street address or further instructions for the street, but normally it's the city, state, and zip code. Next is the recipient's phone number. If known, try to find the phone number of who you're sending the message to. It makes it a lot easier to deliver it if we have a phone number. If you're handling traffic, you'll find out a lot of people send bad phone numbers. You'll go to call the number to deliver the message to the addressee, and the phone number will be wrong. You'll get a message telling you the number's disconnected, or any one of a number of messages the phone company uses, but do your best to have a good phone number. The last line may contain an email address. This is comparatively recently that we started using email addresses. When you read it off, for me, it'd be Whiskey 3 Golf Whiskey Mike @ Alpha Romeo Romeo Lima dot Oscar Romeo Golf. Always use phonetics so it's clear. After the address, insert a break. That's your first break in the message. The text, this is the body of the message, and it contains the message that's to be delivered. Each sentence is ended with X-ray where the period would go. The sentence may not end at the end of your 5-word group, but somewhere the sentence is going to end. If you would normally put a period behind it, put the word X-ray. That means the same thing. It tells the station that there's a break between that word and the next group of phrases. Limit the text to no more than 25 words. This is another pet peeve of mine. ICS 213 was designed to be used as an email, and they're trying to send them over the radio now from the EOCs, the Emergency Operations Centers. And some of those messages, I had one that was over 250 words long. There's no way you can copy that 100% correctly. They don't give you a code for a word count to see if you copied it all correctly. So I've been pushing to use ICS 213 forms, which is the FEMA form, on digital communications and not on CW or on voice. Limit your text to 25 words. That's a comfortable amount that you can send by voice. More than that takes too long. When you send the text, pause after every 5 words. Read the line, pause. Read the next line and pause. This gives the station that's receiving it a chance to write all the words down. And don't worry if that break's not at the end of the sentence. Pause anyhow. Give the guy who's receiving it a chance to catch up. Remember to speak slowly. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so easy to forget that somebody's writing down every word that you're reading, and you read at a pace that's comfortable for you for reading, but the person trying to write it down just can't keep up. Then you get into the repeat situations and trying to get fills and corrections in it. So speak slowly. It's much more important to be slow and accurate than it is to be fast. If there's a telephone number in the text, the area code counts as one group. This is in the body of the message. The area code is one group. The next 3 digits are the next group, and the last 4 digits are the final group. This is on a U.S. telephone number. A telephone number in the U.S. consists of 3 groups. A group of letters that does not form a word should be preceded by the pro word initials. If you have a abbreviated name of a state, it might be initials Papa Alpha. Always use the ITU phonetics for the abbreviated word. Numbers should be preceded by the pro word figures. A combination of letters and numbers should be preceded with the pro word mixed group. Never, ever use X-ray as the last group in the text. The last group in the text is break. X-ray doesn't belong in there. Now, you might want to end the text with X-ray 73, particularly if your message has gone to another ham. Tell them 73. But when you read it back, it's X-ray 73. Avoid the impulse to say 73. The last item in the text block is break, and that's written as BT. Actually, it's BT with a line above it, but BT is good enough. Now, the signature block, this just follows the second break in the message. It can be anything, your name and call sign, or the name of the sending party. If you're relaying a message for someone else, you would have their name in the signature block, not yours. If you're sending a message for someone else, this is called third-party traffic, and we'll discuss that a little bit in just a little bit. After the signature, you might find op note. This is an operator's note. It's usually special instructions from one of the stations along the way. It could be a comment from the previous station, or it may be instructions from the originating station. One of the common instructions you'll find is to reply to a different station than the one that originated. Instead of replying to K6HTM, you might reply, and the op note might be reply W3GWM. After you've sent the message, use the pro word over so the receiving station knows you're done sending. Don't just on-key the mic and stop talking. Say over. Now, counting your groups. This is where people get lost, but remember, this is easy. It's probably the most confusing thing for new traffic handlers, and even experienced traffic handlers make mistakes on the count. It's actually very simple. Just count every group, every word between the 2 breaks in the message. If you're using the standard radiogram form, which I recommend you to do, each line contains 5 groups. Just count the lines and multiply by 5. In our sample message, there were 4 lines of 5 groups and a line with 3 groups, so the check is 23 for that message. You could see in the sample 4 lines of 5 groups, 1 line of 3, check is 23. Kate sends a lot of messages. If you handle traffic, sooner or later, you're going to get a message from Kate. She sends messages out to all the newly licensed hams. And when you got your license, you may have gotten a message from her. She tries to send them to everybody, but expect to see K6HTN often in traffic handling. Now, what happens if your count doesn't match? Well, don't panic. You may have missed a word when you were copying the message, especially if the sender was going too fast. It's no problem. Just ask the sender to repeat the message at reading speed. Instead of going through it real slow and methodical, they'll just read the message and you can find the word or words that you missed, hopefully. If you don't, then you slow down, try again. If you noticed a block that was missing, go ahead and ask for that block, but don't panic if your count doesn't match up. If you miss words while copying, leave a blank. If you know you're missing something, just leave a blank in the message. After the sender has finished, ask for the word before, word after, or all between, giving the last word in the group that you copied correctly, and the next word you copied correctly if you're using all between. Word after is everything, the word after the last word you copied correctly. Word before, that's just a variation on word after. You want the word before the word that you copied correctly. No one copies every message perfectly. Band conditions can make sending and receiving messages difficult on HF. The sending station may have been sending too fast for you to keep up. That's common. That happens a lot. Never hesitate to ask for fills. Our goal is to be 100% correct 100% of the time. Anything else is not acceptable. When you roger the message, if you've received the message 100% correctly, acknowledge it by saying roger, message number, in this case 123. Never say QSL. QSL is a Q code, and that's for CW. We don't use Q words on voice transmissions. Now you're going to hear it because everybody gets into the habit. They know what QSB means. That's fading. QRM is somebody's causing interference on your frequency. QSL means Roger or I received it. But in handling traffic, don't use it. Stick with pro words. Do not use the Q codes. Q codes are for CW. Never say Roger for a message if you have not received every group correctly and have the correct word count. If it doesn't match up, get a repeat. Now, the service message, it's just the message you're sending back to the originating station if one is required. Sometimes the handling instructions require you to send a message back, and this message, it's called the service message. This relates to another message, usually one with problems in delivery. You may have bad phone numbers and want to tell the guy that sent it to you that he sent you a bunch of bad numbers. That happens a lot. I handle a lot of service messages that are just bad numbers. Okay, my dogs are barking at something. There might be a deer coming down through the yard or whatever, but I don't know how good this mic is on canceling noises, but they're making some noise right now. You may use the pro word service or SVC on CW in the preamble before the message number. For instance, you might say service message number 102 or message service 102. Either way, but you don't have to use service in the message. That's been phased out now, and it's very rarely used anymore. The rest of the preamble remains the same, leaving out the precedence of the message. It's also acceptable to treat a service message as routine traffic. The numbered radiogram ARL67 or ARL47 should be used. These mean, they have specific meanings. You can look them up and see what they are. Use brief text in service messages. Don't get wordy. If they've made a mistake, just tell them the phone number's bad. Don't go into a long explanation about how you tried to call it several times and the line was busy or you couldn't get through. Just tell them line busy, bad phone number, or whatever. Just be short and concise. Don't get into detail. The list of numbered radiograms can be found on the card FSD3. The league used to have these printed out and available, and we gave them out at Hamfest. They don't print them out anymore. Their reasoning is you can download the information off their website and print it out yourself. Well, that's true, but I like the stiff paper cards. I still have one around in here somewhere that's the old stiff paper, and it's the old pink card. And the only people that call them pink card are the old timers because they've been gone for a long time now. Now, here's an important note. The net control may send you off frequency to pass traffic. If the assigned frequency that they send you to is busy, the station to receive the message is to continue tuning in the same direction as instructed to find a free frequency. For instance, our East PA net's on 3917. If I send a station to 3910 to pass traffic and 3910 is busy, well, that's down from 3917. So you just keep moving down until you find a free frequency. And the receiving station always calls the sending station. So when you find a free frequency, you start calling the sending station. Don't come back to the net right away and say the frequency was busy. Try to find a free spot and handle the traffic. This procedure is true for phone and CW. Now, if I was to send you to 3920 from 3917 and 3920 is busy, that's moving up. So you're going to go up probably in steps of 3 until you find an open frequency to handle the traffic. Always acknowledge the net control station's instructions before you leave the net frequency by saying Roger. Make sure the net control knows that you received the instructions and that you are leaving the frequency. Now, here's some things to never say. In the preamble of the message, never say with a check of. Just read what's on the preamble. Today's date or 12/3/20. Never say those things. In the address in the message, you'll hear people doing this a lot, and it's wrong. Going to Mr. and Mrs. Frank Smith, common spelling. Well, is common spelling part of the address? Going to part of the address? We know better, but it causes confusion. Maple Street, like the tree. I hear that from people a lot, and it just causes confusion. I write down everything they're saying, and if they say Maple Street, then I hear the next word is like, I'm going to write like. And then I realize they're saying like the tree, and I've already written like the, and realize it didn't belong there. Don't say break and the text after the address. Just say break. Pause in case the receiving station needs fills on the preamble or on the address, and then continue. Don't wait for an acknowledgement. The receiving station shouldn't say anything. If they've copied everything correctly, they just wait for you to begin sending the text again. Again, here's another one. Mr. John Brown liked the color. And remember, sending too fast causes errors by the receiving station. Send at the speed that you think the station can copy. Now, there's something we get called book traffic. This is a group of messages that have the same text going to different addressees. We call it a book. A book message is formed by the originating station when he or she wants to send the same radiogram to 2 or more parties. The text to each party is the same, except the addresses are different. So the way we do this is we send the common parts first, and then we send the addresses. The common parts are the preamble, the text of the message, and usually the signature is the same. So you send those first, and then you send the addresses. You'll just send the message number because it's going to be a different number, and the address, all the address information. We get to move a lot of traffic quickly that way. Now, I hope this makes sense to you now, that you can look at this message and identify the different parts of the message, understand what's supposed to be in those blocks, understand what the different numbers and values that are in the message, where they came from, and understand what this message, how it should be sent, and what you should be writing down to receive it. So I hope it makes sense. You're ready to handle traffic at this point. You don't know everything there is to know. I didn't try to teach you everything. You're going to learn it on the job. You're going to do on-the-job training for this. Get on your nets, talk to people, listen to the way they handle traffic. You'll hear the experienced traffic handlers. They may be going pretty fast, but listen to them anyhow. If they're good traffic handlers, even though they're experienced, they're going to go slow. You might even try writing down the messages. Take your message form and write down your on your radiogram form what the message is that they're sending. It's good practice. Check in the nets and start handling traffic. Don't be afraid because you're new. We were all new at one point in time doing this. That we didn't. Nobody was born as an A1 traffic handler. You've got to learn it.